Justin Hastings. He's a professor of government and international relations at University of Sydney. Thank you so much for joining us, Professor. You know, it was just months ago that Mr. Albanese seemed on the back foot with polls suggesting a likely loss to Mr. Dutton and the Conservative coalition. So how significant is this win, and to what extent can his landslide victory be attributed to Mr. Trump?
So it's relatively unusual for a Australian party to lose a second term. Usually they get at least 2 terms, sometimes 3, before they sort of go back into opposition. So this wasn't necessarily surprising. The Labour Party was relatively unpopular up until maybe a couple of months ago. But I think the resounding success that they've had in this election is a bit surprising. That may be due to concerns that sort of the Liberal Party would be sort of less able to deal with Donald Trump than the Labour Party was.
Professor Hastings, I'm curious. I mean, how is Albo simply the luckiest Labour leader around? I mean, aside from Trump, Scott Morrison was, I know, unpopular in 2022. Peter Dutton, a bit of an oddball, and he ran a terrible campaign, by the way, him and his team. So how much of this is also down to luck and good timing for Anthony Albanese?
Yeah, a lot of this is luck and good timing. I mean, Albanese is not a particularly inspiring leader. He's pretty bland. But Australians generally, they sort of dislike their leaders pretty much equally. So in this sense, he was pretty lucky. I think in some sense, the sort of debate sort of during the campaign was often based on issues that are more domestic to Australia than international relations or in defense. And in that sense, the Labour Party came out ahead.
Professor Hastings, I read a lot that Albanese will be emboldened by his win and may embark on things he was perhaps a little bit afraid to do so in his first term. Can you help us understand, how he might move, beyond tinkering at the edges, which is a term I hear as well in terms of domestic issues that he would need to tackle moving ahead?
Well, so I mean, a lot of the concerns that the Labour Party had with implementing in the first term was because the Greens would often have more extreme sort of views than they did. The Greens vote has collapsed in Australia. So in that sense, they may be more emboldened. They also sort of will have a sort of friendlier Senate, which means they can pass more laws that they might not have been able to pass otherwise. And I think sort of given the size of the majority, they have a full 3 years that they can use to sort of push through what they wanted to. So especially in defense and international relations, the parties were largely on the same side. So I think we'll start to see some continuity from sort of this term into the next term.
Okay, in regards to Trump's tariffs and diplomatic leverage, Professor, we've seen Albanese sort of avoiding overly public friction with Washington. With a stronger mandate in hand, do you expect a shift in tone or perhaps strategy from Canberra?
So, I mean, Australia's general strategy has been to not talk about the tariffs all that much, partly because Australia was hit with the minimum sort of tariffs relative to many other countries. And so they thought maybe if we just ignore it, maybe we'll sort of slip through. I think you'll see Albanese sort of make a stronger commitment to try to get Trump to drop the tariffs entirely. But with that said, sort of Australia's policy over the long term, even before Trump, was to try to sort of diversify both their economic and their strategic bases away from both China and Australia. And you're going to start see continuation of that, especially with the Trump tariffs into the next 3 years.
Okay, so Professor tried to say as little publicly as possible for Washington, but there's also the other big presence in the region, China, Beijing. And we know that Canberra has some experience dealing with economic coercion. That's the allegation. With that export ban, from the Chinese only just easing. So how do you see, Canberra reacting to, first of all, navigating that US-China relationship, which is obviously quite tense now, and also that growing Chinese presence in the region? I mean, in January, I believe there were live firing exercises, held in the waters between Australia and New Zealand.
So, yeah, in terms of the defense sort of issue with regard to China, sort of the Labour government has been quiet but concerned about China. Sort of the China having the live firing exercises was a bit of an embarrassment for the Australian Defence Force in terms of monitoring it and detecting it. And I think you'll probably see sort of in this coming sort of government a sort of continuing sort of pressure to sort of meet China strategically, especially in the South Pacific. to sort of keep the sort of threats as far away as possible, but to cooperate with China where it makes economic sense, and more generally to diversify away from China in terms of their trade with Southeast Asia, especially.
Okay, Professor, finally, before we let you go, both Anthony Albanese and Canada's Mark Carney have been congratulated by top US officials for their wins. President Trump calling Mark Carney personally as well. I'm curious, within diplomatic circles, I mean, I don't know whether you have a sense of this, perhaps you do. How does the White House really feel about helping center-left parties win in these two, fairly big elections?
Well, traditionally in Australia, the Labor Party has been sort of the party that has emphasized standing up to the U.S. more, the Liberal Party. With that said, in their actual policies, they tend to be quite, pretty much similar, right? Sort of in dealing with the U.S. So I think sort of within the U.S., you would imagine that they are able to work with Albanese as much as if they had been working with Dutton. And you could see sort of things like AUKUS continuing to go forward to the extent that the U.S. wants them to, regardless of who's in power.
Okay, Professor, we'll have to leave it there for now, but thank you very much for your insight this morning. That was Justin Hastings, Professor of Government and International Relations at the University of Sydney.